The golf cart was still warm when the tow truck driver strapped it down like a captured beast. Meanwhile, 30 margarita-drunk guests inside Sandra Withers' backyard luau watched from her patio, horrified as her flamingo-pink E-Z-GO got hoisted up like it had just committed a felony. One woman dropped her paper plate of coconut shrimp. Someone gasped with a shocked voice, "That's Sandra's cart." And then I stepped into view, holding a garage remote and a frosty LaCroix. "She blocked my driveway," I said calmly. "And HOA rules are rules, right?" 3 months earlier, Blake Morrison, a quiet tech consultant with a bonsai hobby, had moved into Maple Crest Estates, a stucco sun-dress suburb outside Fort Worth. My house backed up to a golf course. I minded my business, trimmed my hedges to code, and paid my dues on time. Enter Sandra Withers, HOA president, tiki enthusiast, and self-appointed gatekeeper of community aesthetics. Her mission was to purge all perceived threats to her suburban utopia, including, inexplicably, me. First came the letters. Improperly stored trash bins, the first one read, though they were behind a fence. Then came, unapproved shade of mailbox black, though Sherwin-Williams disagreed with her assessment. She began appearing during my evening walks, pretending to check a non-existent clipboard. One day, I caught her photographing my succulents from the sidewalk. Rumors swirled at the block potluck that I was a renter, an atheist, or worse, from California. When my contractor parked a van in my own driveway for a bathroom renovation, Sandra sent a certified warning for commercial vehicle loitering. The harassment escalated week by week. She measured my grass with an actual ruler. One Saturday morning, I watched from my kitchen window as she crawled on her hands and knees, documenting what she claimed were violations of the 3-inch maximum height ordinance. When I installed solar panels, she called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss reflective surfaces disrupting the neighborhood aesthetic. The motion failed, but she glared at me throughout the entire hour-long discussion. Her vendetta became personal when she discovered I worked from home. Running a business from a residential property, she announced with a triumphant tone at the next meeting, waving printed screenshots of my LinkedIn profile. The board reminded her that remote work wasn't the same as operating a commercial enterprise. She huffed and muttered something about slippery slopes and property values. The following weeks brought an onslaught of petty violations. She cited me for excessive bird attraction when I hung a single hummingbird feeder. She complained about unauthorized aromatics when I grilled steaks on my back patio. She even tried to fine me for premature holiday decoration when I put up Halloween decorations on September 30th. Each letter arrived with the same passive-aggressive signature, maintaining standards together, Sandra Withers, HOA president. My neighbor, Janet Hong, stopped by one evening with a casserole and a warning. "She did this to the Johnsons last year," Janet said with a concerned voice. "They ended up moving just to get away from her constant harassment. She's got it out for anyone she sees as different or nonconforming." I thanked Janet for the food and the information, filing both away for future reference. It hit a new level the weekend of her backyard luau, a grotesque explosion of lays, Jimmy Buffett music, and sunburnt HOA board members. I returned from Costco with a trunk full of groceries to find her golf cart, custom wrapped in a hibiscus decal, parked horizontally across my garage door, fully blocking access. No note, no knock, just turf dominance in its purest form. The cart sat there like a tropical barricade, preventing me from accessing my own property. I rang her doorbell repeatedly. No answer. Her tiki torches burned mockingly in the distance, and I could hear the muffled sounds of Margaritaville drifting over her fence. That's when I noticed she'd moved my trash bin to the curb to make room for her cart, even though trash day was 3 days away. I snapped photos from every angle, documenting the timestamps and the clear obstruction. I called the non-emergency line, my voice steady despite my frustration. The operator asked, "Is the vehicle obstructing private property?" I said, "Oh, yes." Spectacularly. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Officer Daniels, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, surveyed the scene with raised eyebrows. "This is definitely blocking your garage," she said, stating the obvious. "Do you want it towed?" I nodded, showing her the photos I'd taken and the HOA bylaws I'd printed out, specifically highlighting section 4.3 about unauthorized parking on private property. She called for a tow truck while I waited, sipping my now warm LaCroix. The tow truck came fast, its diesel engine rumbling through the quiet suburban street. The driver, a burly man named Eddie, chuckled when he saw the scene. "You got documentation?" he asked with an amused tone. I showed him timestamps, photos, and HOA parking bylaws printed and highlighted in neon yellow. He nodded appreciatively. "She's getting clamped," he said, pulling out his equipment. Meanwhile, I waved politely to Sandra's guests, who were now migrating to the front lawn like confused flamingos, watching their hostess's beloved cart rise into the air like a sacrificial offering. The mechanical whir of the lift mixed with gasps of disbelief from the party guests. Sandra stormed out in flip-flops and a flower crown just in time to scream with an enraged voice, "You're making a scene." Her face was red, whether from anger or margaritas, I couldn't tell. I replied calmly, "You blocked my garage. This is the scene." She rushed toward Eddie, waving her arms frantically. "You can't take that. It's my personal property." Eddie, unfazed by her theatrics, continued securing the cart. "Ma'am, it's illegally parked on private property. I've got authorization from the property owner and law enforcement." Officer Daniels stepped between them, her hand resting casually on her radio. "Ma'am, please step back and let him do his job." Sandra's guests huddled in small groups, whispering and pointing. I heard fragments of conversation floating across the lawn. Did she really block his garage? That's so unlike Sandra. Well, she has been pretty aggressive lately. The HOA vice president, Harold Garrison, approached me with a concerned expression. "Blake, I'm sorry about this. We'll address it at the next board meeting." I nodded, maintaining my composure despite the satisfaction bubbling inside me. Turns out, the golf cart wasn't registered or insured. It also wasn't street legal, a fact that Officer Daniels discovered when she ran the VIN number. The tow company impounded it for 72 hours, and Sandra had to pay nearly $600 to retrieve it, plus additional fines for operating an unregistered vehicle on public roads. The incident triggered a review of HOA misuse of common areas and abuse of power by board members. I filed a formal grievance with the HOA, attaching all my documentation, including the previous harassment letters and photos of Sandra measuring my grass. Other neighbors came forward with their own stories. Tom, from 2 houses down, revealed she tried to fine him for having the wrong shade of beige on his shutters. The family from Oak Street shared how she'd photographed their children's bikes in the driveway and threatened fines for unsightly storage of recreational equipment. At the next HOA meeting, held in the community center that smelled perpetually of coffee and disappointment, the room was packed. Word had spread about the golf cart incident, and everyone wanted to witness the showdown. Sandra sat at the head table, her usual smugness replaced with defensive anger. When the vote of no confidence was called, she was voted out 9-1, her lone vote, hers. She stood up with a shaky voice. "This is a witch hunt. I've kept this neighborhood beautiful for 7 years. I was nominated for board president but declined, instead accepting the new position of parking liaison. My first act was striping clearer driveway boundaries in neon orange paint that practically glowed in the Texas sun. But the consequences for Sandra didn't end there. The city cited her for multiple violations related to the unregistered golf cart, resulting in fines totaling $2,300. When she tried to protest at City Hall, they discovered she'd been using the HOA's tax-exempt status to avoid paying registration fees on what was clearly a personal vehicle. The investigation revealed a pattern of financial misconduct. Sandra had been charging the HOA for gas for her patrol rounds in the golf cart, claiming it as a business expense. She'd also billed the association for the custom hibiscus wrap, listing it as official HOA vehicle identification. The forensic accountant found over $12,000 in questionable expenses over her 7-year reign. The district attorney's office took interest, especially when they learned she'd been using her position to give her husband's landscaping company exclusive HOA contracts without competitive bidding. The final blow came 3 weeks later at the courthouse. Sandra stood before Judge Patricia Coleman, her flower crown replaced by a conservative pantsuit that couldn't hide her trembling hands. The charges were read with devastating clarity: embezzlement, misuse of nonprofit funds, and fraud. Her attorney pleaded for leniency, citing her overzealous community service. But the judge wasn't moved. "Ms. Withers, you violated the trust of your neighbors and abused your position for personal gain," Judge Coleman said with a stern voice. The gavel came down with finality: 2 years probation, $15,000 in restitution, 300 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board in the state of Texas. Sandra's legs buckled as she gripped the defendant's table, her voice barely a whisper as she said, "But I was just trying to keep the neighborhood nice."